All right, good morning. We'll get today's meeting underway. We've got quite a lot to get through today. We will start with Craig's issues and options paper, so the general matters. And then I'm just getting the agenda, in fact, for today in front of me. And then we're going to have Sean from the TSP here at 10 o'clock. That'll give us the opportunity for a deeper dive into that transport discussion, and in particular looking at which different parts of the system are delivering what and what the roles and responsibilities are. That'll assist us with any of those outstanding matters in the transport area and just to get a clearer view of what's happening there. And then we'll go through the issues that were raised yesterday. There were a number of matters that we wanted additional information or were looking for change or wanting further report back on today. So then we'll get into those matters, and I just acknowledge the work that I know people were doing till reasonably late in the evening yesterday to get that information back to us. Very aware that we left you only a short time to do that, and we appreciate the lengths that people have gone to bring us that additional information and those answers and changed wording and so on today. So we look forward to receiving that in due course. Now, I just wanted to, before we get into Craig's report, circle back to some comments on Wairakei South that were made yesterday. And I don't think this makes any changes to the position that we took in the end, but I just wanted Andy to have the opportunity to tell us TCC's position on Wairakei South so that we can be confident that we've got the correct information on TCC's position, and that we're comfortable with the decision we made yesterday, which was to make no change to the strategy in that regard. So, Andy, if you want to just update us on the position of the council.
Sure, I can do that. So I think I'll just step back to late last year after the submissions had been received, and we were, I guess, considering how we might proceed with this matter. So some senior staff across the three councils sort of got together and thought, well, this is a difficult piece of land, but we don't want to rule things out, and we want to give developers a chance to, I guess, prove to us that, they can step through those engineering challenges or not. And so from that perspective, I guess we got to the position which is consistent with the agenda that said that the Bell Road South, Wairakei South area would not be confirmed in the FDS, but it would be, I guess, acknowledged that that a developer was working on it, and we would consider it in future when there was more firm technical information available. And of course, that position changed through what was tabled. I guess the issue that we take with that just slightly was that, yes, there was TCC involvement in that position, but it was through, I guess, the engineering and infrastructure side of our business, and we hadn't had a chance to, I guess, had that internal discussion in terms of the land use and strategic side of the business. We do note that the land strategically does have some advantages, being close to the new interchange, the TEL, and some things like that. It also has those challenges that we all know about. So I guess from our position, looking at it more broadly, we don't want to entirely rule this area out. We do acknowledge the challenges, but we would be in a position where we, as TCC, would be willing to consider the technical information brought forward by the landowner in future. We would not be in a position to, I guess, commit council resource to, I guess, progressing our own technical work ourselves or with the other smart growth partners, but certainly reviewing and forming a position that could feed into a future strategy review is something that would be open to. So hopefully that clarifies our position.
That's great, thank you. So clearly we're not ruling it out, but we're certainly not ruling it in at the moment. There's further work to be done to set those hazards issues aside, and that's the point at which you would consider committing resources to it, but there are not resources committed at this time. So just thinking of the position we took yesterday, that was to make no change, that's consistent with TCC's position, isn't it? To make no change to the strategy.
Yeah, I think as long as the strategy doesn't include words that are specifically kind of precluding that area, then I guess we would be comfortable. I think I just do want to acknowledge that the area is not in the TCC district, so it's obviously in the Western Bay district, so it's probably not just TCC's view that is important here, it's the view of the other two councils.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we probably just need to check, and I'm assuming it would be the case, that the district council's view would be consistent with the position that we took yesterday. And then I probably just need someone to check that the position we took yesterday is consistent with what we've just heard as well. Now, Craig's conflicted on this, so I don't know who would be able to do that. Nicola, is that something that you're able to look into for us?
Yeah, I can have a look at that. I think in terms of the strategy, it's consistent,
Good.
but in terms of what we've said in the IOP, it may not be, because we've been quite firm in there, and based on what Nathan presented to you yesterday, that as Andy's pointed out, it's the engineers that have met on that they've said no development now or ever, basically. So that's what's in the IOP. So it's whether you want to change that position and soften that.
Yeah, given that the IOP is part of the public record, we probably should. Whether that's an update to the IOP or whether it's something in the minutes of this meeting that address the matter, it might be good to make a change to the IOP just so that anybody going back to look at that can see the reality as we now understand it, rather than the position that it was written on at that time.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Don't we need an absolutely lined up partner's view on Wairakei South and Tara Road? I mean, yesterday when Nathan appeared and I think I asked the question, well, is this a joined up view of the partners? I don't know that he said it was, but I'm all in favour of putting pause on this until we get a joined up partners view on both Wairakei South and Tara Road. It's really important.
And it may be that we can't get to that position this morning. In which case this would be an additional piece of work that we would need to set aside.
We could reconvene if
Indeed,
need be,
yeah.
in terms of that.
And then maybe, I mean, this may be one of a small number of matters that are left overhanging from today that we may need to do that, and we can. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we pushed the decision-making meeting of SLG out to the 23rd of April, to give us the time to tidy up any matters like this if we needed to.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that, as Andy said late last year, senior staff and general managers met to talk about this very issue and our approach on the FDS and some differing opinions, but I'm not certain that Regional Council were able to attend that meeting. But I felt that we did have agreement generally, may have been outside that meeting, but we can obviously need to revisit that. But I think from Western Bay's perspective, the role of the FDS, and certainly from my opinion, is that we don't need to preclude land through the FDS. We need to identify land that we have agreed as suitable for settlement and future development. So I would find it a bit unusual if the FDS was going to particularly rule out a piece of land.
My understanding, sorry, John.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's really a matter of the language that we use, that perhaps, as Andy said, soften the language a little bit. So that should further information come in the future, and it may be well down the track, that it's not totally ruled out. But I mean, given the other discussions we've had and a lot of talk about matters like resilience and managed retreat and a whole lot of stuff like that, it would be unwise at this point in time to give any indication that it was a very significant possibility, in my view.
Chairman, I won't be able to participate in any decision until I've spoken to Regional Council staff. I can do that today by telephone. I've had a couple of emails that are potentially relevant, so I need to go back and understand their position and whether it can all come to a very happy ending with agreement on wording. But I'm sorry, I just need to get that clarification.
Understood. Right, okay. So we may be able to resolve this today on the back of those conversations taking place and some advice that tells us that we've got the position of all of the partners, all of the relevant partners, and that the position that we're taking in the strategy is aligned with those positions. If we can't resolve that today, then it will need to be set aside for a further discussion. And if there's any inkling that it would be better to put it forward to a further discussion rather than rushing through this today, if there's any information that we would rather have or anything that we would rather reflect on, I'm quite happy to defer that discussion to a meeting set up just for that purpose, or indeed any other matters that we need to defer from today as well. If we can close it out today, it would be good to do so, but I realise that requires some conversations to occur and a bit of further work to be done in order for us to do that. So why don't we just set that aside to pick up later in the meeting this morning, and if we can resolve it, we will. If we can't, or if there's even a small chance that there's further information we need that we can't get, we'll set it aside for a further discussion. All
Andrew,
right, thank you.
and I'd just like to support the commentary around having that joined up advice. I think that is key, and it's advice on behalf of each organisation, not part of an organisation. So when we get that advice, whether that's TCC, Western Bay or the region, there is advice on behalf of each of those organisations. And being very clear that that represents the organisational view.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult then if it doesn't, because those views are then not resolved if they're in different parts of an organisation.
Yeah, and given, you know, the difference in a view of technical staff on technical matters versus the view of the organisation across all of its facets, the organisation as a whole, you know, whilst there's technical information that might support a particular position and even technical advice that's going up into that bigger high-level position, we need to make sure that we've got the actual position of the organisation. I'm wondering whether we're actually better, rather than putting pressure on people this morning, to set this aside for a further discussion at a time to be determined, when the internal discussions have been able to occur, when all of that's able to be collated into one coherent set of advice for the panel, with a further panel discussion to determine our position on it once all of that's in front of us. So let's set that aside. Let's not revisit it today, because, you know, trying to have phone calls in the space of a couple of hours and hoping people are available and so on, that's not best practice. Let's set it aside, and I think it probably requires this might be the start of a list of things that we need to talk about or confirm in a meeting outside of this one, and we'll just need to think about how we handle that by way of the resolutions as well today. All right, great. Good discussion. Glad we got to a good point at the end of it. Thanks very much. All right, so Craig, now I'll turn to you to present your report. And we do have a page number for this one. We're on page 281. That's Craig's general issues and options paper, which he's going to speak to now.
On. Yes, I'll just work through these issues and options. Discuss each one as we go, as we did yesterday. So the first issue was opposition to some aspects of the strategy in rationalising smart growth TSP and UFTI documents. The recommended approach there is to note the submission and make no changes, and because in my assessment, that integration of those documents has occurred through the smart growth strategy that's been presented, and that was the intention of it. So yeah, no changes on that one.
All right, so just confirming that we're comfortable with that position. Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
The option 2 was changing the vision to reflect contemporary perspectives, and there were some examples of other urban growth partnerships. The recommendation is to retain the vision as per the version released for consultation, and mainly from the perspective that the contemporary issues set out in those submissions are addressed in the strategy, and and looking at where's the best place to where should we put our efforts in terms of our strategy? Probably not worth doing that. There's quite a lot of ramifications from changing the vision. It would flow through a lot of documents and branding and all sorts of things. So not really seeing a real upside to that, to justify that change. So even though, acknowledge that there are some good points being made there, and perhaps at the next review of the strategy, we could revisit the vision at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting that this was raised in submissions, and I've certainly got some agreement that revisiting the vision is a good idea, but that typically would be something that you'd do at the beginning of a review of a strategy rather than towards the end of the process. So I certainly agree with the comment that if we were going to look at changing the vision, that would be part of a future review. I certainly see the difficulties in changing the vision now that then would require possibly the tone and some of the language of the strategy and some other changes to be made, which at this late stage in the piece wouldn't be the best use of our time. It's the content of the strategy that's the important part at this stage. So certainly for myself, I'm in agreement with the recommendation. Are there any other comments on this, Paula?
Yeah, look, totally understand about the practicality of changing the vision at the end of a process. But my question is it intended, was it ever intended, and does it continue to be intended that that vision is also applicable at a local community level, so that that vision guides the spatial planning that's going on within the local community exercises?
Yeah, it is, because I mean, I think the vision is really about providing a balance. It's not just a residential strategy. It's a strategy. Live, work, play, learn is intended to say there are a lot of facets to growth management, and we need to be recognising those and not have a singular focus on, say, residential capacity provision. And I think as you work down the sort of spatial levels to local level, I mean, that then supports the sort of the hyper-local approach of having, as much as possible within walking distance. I think it can apply at all scales. So I quite like the vision for that reason. It does work in that way.
Yeah, thanks, Craig, for that confirmation, because I do think that it's really important that when the local community planning is being done, it has regard to an overall intent to provide for that 15-minute accessibility to local amenities and facilities. So thanks for that, but I'm in support of retaining the current vision.
Just further to the discussion, in the existing strategy 2013, there is quite a good articulation of what the live, learn, work and play means, both at a sub-regional level, local level, etc. So it's actually quite helpful in terms of what it means and then how potentially it's applied. And I'm not sure whether that articulation, I haven't seen it, is in the existing strategy. And it's on page 13 of the 2013 strategy as a reference.
Is it worth going back to look at that in the 2013 strategy and see whether there's something similar that could or should be incorporated into our current strategy, just by way of further explanation?
I think that's a good idea.
All right.
I think, given Chair, there were submissions around that, and what does that live, learn, work and play mean and how it's applied. So think it's actually responding to some of those.
Yep. So it sounds as though then there's support for going back to the 2013 strategy, looking at the part of that strategy that Bill has just highlighted and putting something similar, or possibly even the same, into this iteration of the strategy. So if we can pick that up, that would be great. And then we'll need to approve that at some point. So the way that it's integrated will need to be approved by the panel at some point as well. And I'm conscious that that work isn't able to occur. I'm assuming that work won't be able to occur before the end of the session today.
I think it's quite a specific change that we could easily pick up on with I think the decision could direct that be incorporated.
All right, great.
Updated form to match the language of.
So let's look at capturing something in a resolution then that makes it clear today so that we know exactly what it is that's going to occur. All right, thank you.
Moving to issue 3, this is a similar issue around updating the vision to incorporate values expressed by tangata whenua, and similar view really that while we good to update the vision, there is actually some really strong expression of these values in the strategy as it is, and I think at the workshop stage, Te Pio Kawe was asked for his advice on whether that was sufficient. I think he was comfortable with that at the time. So the recommendation is to not make a change, but definitely to acknowledge that those values are in the strategy, in the decision.
All right, so just checking that we're comfortable with that approach. Yep, okay, great, thank you.
Issue 4, there was some proposals to add to our challenges and opportunities. And the recommendation is to make some changes as set out in the report around population change and state of the environment, loss of biodiversity, and in addition, text in there rather than reading it out, take that as read, but taking on board those submissions and making some amendments.
So through you, Chair, Craig, you're suggesting adding a statement on equitable outcomes.
That comes up
Am
later.
I ahead of you?
Slightly ahead of me because I've worked on that because that issue came up yesterday.
Yes.
And I've done some work on that issue overnight, and that's is an updated issues and options paper, which I've yet to, because that's going to come up on the screen a little later. So I've made a suggestion on how to deal with that, and based on the work that the social infrastructure team have done. So
great, yeah, because that was one of the issues that was raised yesterday that also picks up the issues that's raised here. So option 4A is obviously your recommendation here.
it is, yes.
Yep. Are we comfortable with the position in option 4A and the suggested or the recommended wording? Opportunities on page 14. Just having a look at page 14. Yeah, so that would add an additional wording to the opportunities on page 40. Yep, that makes some sense. All right, are people generally comfortable with that? Yep, excellent. So we'll take option 4A, thank you.
Issue 5 was some proposals for adding in transformational shifts around social infrastructure, resilience, productive land protection, and air quality, principally around Mount Wanganui airshed. And the recommendation is not to add any shifts, transformational shifts that we had. Got 6 there already. We don't want to sort of lose focus from those, and certainly all the issues referenced in those suggestions already in the strategy in various forms. So there's no gap, it's just, you know, where they sit. So yeah, that's the recommendation hasn't changed from that.
So the recommendation then is to make no changes to the transformational shifts, 5B.
Yes.
On the basis that the issues raised requesting or suggesting the additional transformational shift adequately addressed throughout the strategy or elsewhere in the strategy.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we comfortable with that position? Yeah. All right, so we'll take option 5B, thank you.
Issue 6 on implementation of funding plan and some specific actions to be included. I've had a closer look at this after the discussions yesterday, and in the updated IOP report that will come through later in the meeting, I've got some suggestions on how to address the issue of clarity and how the implementation of funding plan works. So if we can we defer this until that comes up?
I think that makes sense. And I mean, this is very general anyway. One of the things we will be looking at is those actions that we've put across to the implementation and funding plan. What's the implementation and funding plan working group?
That isn't a thing. That
right.
Doesn't exist.
Okay, so let's deal with this separately as part of the discussions we'll have later then about the implementation and funding plan, given the general nature of this option anyway.
Yeah, when the work on this paper was started, it was by Annika Lane kicked it off, and I should have picked up that is out of date. There was an idea of having a working group earlier on, but that never didn't get legs.
Right, okay, so we'll pick that up as a separate issue as part of the further work we'll do this morning. Issue 7.
Yeah, issues 7 and 8, sort of looking at those together really. Yeah, some real issues raised by the community about the nature of the consultation and engagement, and sort of flowing through to some requests for some structural changes to the Smart Growth Partnership around including additional members in different parts of that structure, particularly on the Smart Growth Leadership Group. And the recommendation is to note those submissions and to give further consideration to the whole process of consultation and engagement, including that partnership structure. So yeah, not a change in the strategy itself, but a work on and something that would need to come through in the implementation plan.
So the suggestion is that this be referred to SLG for consideration alongside the development of communications and engagement plan. And I mean, this is raised in the context of re-establishing the forums, or is often raised in the context of re-establishing the forums. But what it really is a broad discussion about communication and engagement more generally, community involvement, community consultation, community support, and how we engage and involve the community to best achieve that. I think the idea of setting that aside for a separate discussion, particularly once the strategy is adopted and we know what it is that we're going to be implementing, how we best involve the community and engage with the community in that environment is the discussion. So yeah, my view is that setting that aside for a further bespoke discussion is absolutely the right thing to do. Are people generally agreed with that?
Through you, Chair, just so long as the scope covers the whole policy development process, which is, I think, what a lot of these submitters were saying, that they didn't feel they had the opportunity for their voices to be heard in this whole development process. And then there's a subsequent implementation and review. So, yeah, I'm happy that it goes to another piece of work, but I do want to see it have some priority.
Yes.
Because we've got a lot on the plate, and our community are very keen to be fully engaged.
Bill?
Just following on to Paula's comments, I think when this work is being undertaken, and whatever arrangements are recommended, the roles need to be crystal clear and expectations. And they can often be different from the policy formulation and development through to implementation. So I think being very clear then what the need is and how that then is given life to. And I'll just make the comment, it doesn't mean just going back to what we had in the past. This is the opportunity for for want of a better word, a clean slate review.
Yeah, it's very easy to come into this conversation with a particular outcome in mind or wedded to a particular outcome. I think it's important that we have, and I like the way that the community involvement in policy and development is one thing, and implementation may well be something different. And we'll need to have a look at what other consultation and engagement is underway, particularly when there's implementation which has been delivered by partners with its own consultation and engagement alongside. But yeah, I think to have a holistic view of this across the whole range of areas that the community will want to be engaged and involved in, and we heard that loud and clear through submissions, without any particular result or outcome in mind other than an effective way of engaging and the community engaging with us, is the way to approach this. So I agree with the comments that have been made. As long as we're approaching it in that spirit and with that breadth, then referring it to a separate piece of work will work well, I think.
Mr. Chairman, just an observation, if I may, and, this particular process, which has been ongoing for a considerable period of time, really reflects the absolute enormity and complexity of what smart growth actually is. I mean, if you look at the pan-organisational resources that have gone over many, a long period of time into this, both at central and local government level, tangata whenua, etc., the staffing input, the consultants and all the rest. She's a complex beast, this smart growth. And I think, we have to recognise that, for many people who want to be involved, it's where do I get in here amongst this myriad of levels and complexity. So I think we do have to recognise that this is a very, very complex system that's in operation. And people sometimes just think it's the Smart Growth Leadership Group that sit around a table and make decisions. It ain't. That's just a tiny cherry on the top of an enormous cake. Anyway, you can see that I'm in a Friday mood.
All right, is there any other commentary on this issue?
So just to comment that the recommendation is around the communications and engagement plan, which would go right through to 2027. So we'll take the 3-year, that would be the focus of that plan. So that would be the policy development leading up to the review as well, which I think that would encompass the issue you raised about policy in part of that.
So option 8A, and in fact option 7A as well, picks up the discussion that we've had here. So the breadth that we've described in the discussion that we've just had, option 8A picks that up, or is option 8A narrower than that?
I think it's part of the same discussion, really.
Okay, yeah. All right, so as long as we can be confident that option 8A encompasses everything that we've talked about this morning, then I think we can be happy with option 8A. Yep. All right, so we'll take option 8A, issue 9.
Issue 9 is in relation to the Hamilton to Tauranga corridor, and this was missed off. The early draft of this report was an internal submission that we'd made to incorporate that piece of work, which came after the strategy was completed. So you can see in the decision, draft decision in here, there's a plan, which is on page, it's pretty hard to read, but the scale it's at, but it's page 301. So that's a plan that was developed between Future Proof and Smart Growth, and a number of people contributed to that piece of work to identify effectively all the existing work streams that are at various states, whether they're approved or business cases or whatever. We've tried to draw all of those threads together into one plan and to provide some description around that to illustrate what does the interregional transport investment plan look like. So that's...
Question, Chair. Oh, sorry. Is that plan plugged into, wonderful segue into our guest speaker, Sean, is it plugged into the TSP?
I'm not sure it's plugged in, but I can say the TSP are aware of this piece of work and helped us refine what's shown, particularly on the Tauranga side of it. And I know the equivalent group in the Waikato did the same thing. So we had sort of those sort of transport entities and both the partnerships have a close look at this. And there were quite a lot of changes that came through that. Also in the RLTP, or I haven't checked the current one, but certainly the previous one had quite clear reference to this interregional transport arrangement. And we've tried to sort of keep the language consistent with that. So that's something we need to check and make sure it's still there.
What I'm keen to understand, though, apart from just the language acknowledging it,
Yes.
is has this in any way become live in terms of any of our transport programs, including the Regional Land Transport Plan? That's what I'm keen to understand, because having note there will be dollars associated in here somewhere.
It's the same projects, just shown in a regional context and how they all work together. So it's consistent with that.
So there's nothing new.
Nothing new. I suppose the one thing I'd point out, though, is that this plan has much more it includes the rail upgrades alongside the road stuff. So it's a balance between, you know, the freight going to the rail mode is identified as a really key thing in the long term. There's a whole lot of benefits around taking pressure off the road network and improving economic outcomes. So the interesting thing when you look at it is that there needs to be pick up on the rail investment as well as the road, and the focus largely ends up on the road. So I think it's important that this plan shows the significance of the two modes and how they interrelate over time. And interestingly, looking at this closely, it's actually the Southern Auckland rail corridor that is one of the biggest constraints to increasing rail freight in our sub-region. That's the pinch point. So it's complicated, but what this plan is trying to show is there's a very important need to look at the whole network, and you can make, you've got to look at where your optimal investment is to get the biggest gain. And that's what this is trying to do.
But again, that's great, that's very strategic, but it's surely got to end up somewhere in some investment information, which is all integrated and gives us a clear understanding of the priorities, which at the moment are very road oriented. That's all I'm trying to say, this whole need for this integrated transport network picture. Hi, Sean.
All right, so
It is trying to do that very thing. So it's drawn information from various work streams and put it onto one plan to try and show how they all interrelate. And it's a complex picture, and we've tried to make it simple, but there's always challenges there.
But given that it's drawn from a number of different sources, then there should be no inconsistency with any of those sources.
We've tried very hard to make sure that's what we've shown.
All right. So the question for us is whether we include the investment programme as depicted on the map in the strategy. The suggestion is that we do. People comfortable with that? Yep. All right, so we'll take option 9A. John, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that essentially that corridor is the base of the golden triangle that we often talk about. And so it's critically important. And this region, much as we might talk about it, all that we have here, it wouldn't be anything like the same without the interaction with the rest of the, particularly the northern half of the North Island, in terms of freight in both directions, and in terms perhaps of the desirability of our huge coastline and climate, and so many other people that want to access all that. So it is a very important issue.
Look, I totally agree. It's absolutely a critical issue. And it's, you know, but I have to say again, somewhere at the end of the day, it has to have some dollars attaching to it, and that has to have relevance in terms of financial investment. That's all I'm trying to say. Integration, integration, integration.
And there's mirrored provisions in the future-proof strategy, so we've tried to ensure that's consistent.
And this is one area where we've worked very closely with Future-Proof. I mean, there were a number of discussions between Smart Growth and Future-Proof that led to this map being developed. But this is just one area where there are some shared challenges and shared opportunities between this sub-region and the sub-region that Future Growth are working on. This is just one example of an interface between Smart Growth and Future Proof, and it's my hope, and it's something that Bill and I have talked about already, that there'll be more interface between Future Proof and Smart Growth to perhaps identify other areas where we've got some shared priorities, some shared opportunities and challenges, and other areas that we can be working on in the way that we worked on this particular project. So that's still to come. All right, so in terms of adopting the recommendation, including the investment programme and the Smart Growth strategy, we'll take option 9A and we will include this. And that then, Craig, brings us to the end of the options that you're putting in front of us, the issues that you're putting in front of us in this general paper. Great, thank you. So we've now got Sean with us from TSP. Sean, do you want to come up to the table? There were a number of issues that were raised yesterday as we were talking about transport and more generally that were around the various different parts of the transport system and how they integrate to make sure that we weren't doing anything in the Smart Growth strategy that was inconsistent with work that's going on, and that the Smart Growth strategy reflected correctly so that people can continue working together for good transport outcomes. And then in particular, the way that the RLTP fits into this, where the funding's coming from, the interface with central government agencies, where TSP fits into all of that, and where TSP fits into Smart Growth in terms of oversight, reporting, and all of those things as well. Now, that's kind of my summary of some of the issues that were raised yesterday. I don't know whether any other panel members want to chip in at this point with any other issues that were of particular importance yesterday or that were raised and that you'd want some comment on today. Paula, I know, this was something that came out of some of your commentary yesterday, although it's an area that we all have an interest in. Was there anything you wanted to add at this point?
I think you've adequately covered it. Who's TSP? What are you doing? And is it all integrated with our major planning? That's really it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from panel members before we move into this segment? All right, Sean, so you've got a reasonably clear picture, and I know you've been talking to Craig as well in the background, a reasonably clear picture of where we're wanting clarity and information. This time is yours, and thanks very much indeed for joining us at short notice this morning.
Yeah, no worries. It has been short notice, so I'm happy for this to be a conversation as well. So I've got some thoughts that I can outline, and then if there's any other questions or concerns or thoughts, we can talk them through. And just sitting here talking about this, it's made me think about that this is a complex environment, and we seem to be at a bit of a confluence this year of some work that's happened previously and how we're going to be delivering in the future. So there's a lot of threads that have not fully formed yet and haven't fully come together, but this year is quite an important year around preparing for delivery. So TSP is really, there's two parts to TSP. There's the Integrated Transport Program and there's the partnership. So in terms of where the transport program comes from, Smartgrowth, UFT, and UFT strategy was connected centres. So in response to having a high-level strategic growth plan for the Western Bay, the partnership decided to develop a integrated transport program, which is how you're going to deliver that connected centres program with multimodal corridors. So so that's where TSP was born from, and it was probably in 2020, I think. So it was before I came on board. So TSP developed a transport model, conceptual model. So you can have transport models between computers, but then you can have a conceptual model of how the transport system is developed, and that's called TSOF, or Transport System Operating Framework. And the TSOF is made up of 3 parts. So we have modal priorities. So we have a conceptual model of the network. You say what are the different modes that are going to go on that network, and then what are their priorities. You see you have a hierarchy. You look at the existing transport network, look at the gaps, and then you look at solutions to fill those gaps. You prioritize it using investment objectives, and then on the back end of that, with some actual computer modelling, you end up with a program. So that's the TSOF program, and that was delivered in 2021, and that includes all of the 80 odd projects. I think it's a $10 billion program, so it's a large program of infrastructure investment, and that's the starting point for what would you need to deliver the connected centres strategy. So it's fully integrated with Smartgrowth. From there, that got recommended into the asset owner organisations. So Waka Kotahi and TCC, Western Bay, and Regional Council receives TSOF and uses that as a starting point for developing up their LTP programs, which subsequently go into the RLTP. So there's a direct link between the work that gets done in the planning phase at that TSOF through LTPs and RLTPs. Through that process, there's a constraining that happens because everyone's financially constrained. So then you end up having to readjust the program so that you then end up within your fiscal envelope that you're able to deliver. So that happened back in 2021, I think, and that informed the RLTP, and something like 98% of the TSP program was funded at that point. Projects have been delivered, and there's a whole lot of delivery happening now. And then last year was the TSOF was then refreshed. So it wasn't a full rebuild, but it was a double checking back, making sure that we're sitting within the policy environment, a bit more focused on emissions. So we've all been through that, and Smartgrowth endorsed TSOF last year. And now where we're at. So last year we worked very closely with the RLTP team, and so to answer the question about integration with RLTP, there's a strong level of integration with the RLTP. Okay, so there's 2 key challenges with delivery, with what we're doing. So it's the funding challenge, and then there's a deliverability. And on the deliverability in particular, that's where the focus of TSP is this year. We've got a few key activities. I was just going to outline what we're going to be doing this year, and then a couple more points, and then we can have a conversation. Any other questions? So through, as I mentioned, the LTP and RLTP process constrained the program, changed things. we've done some further planning work as part of the SURF Climate Emission Reduction Fund. We had some funding to do some optimisation work, so we're looking at, we've been developing an optimisation program, which is it's a good bit of work that helps to identify where you can get best bang for buck, still sitting within that wider strategic context of what and why and how, what needs to be built. There's work getting done on operational integration so that at the moment you've got TCC and Whakatahi jointly operating the transport system. And so looking at how that work can be, and this is not getting done under TSP, it's just one of the pieces of the puzzle, how the operations of the transport system could be improved so that during the large construction phase that's started and will continue can be done without breaking the network. And there's another little bit of work that's happening within TCC around what I call optimisation and network preparation. So council has a large amount of money actually, to put towards key critical projects that are going to alleviate congestion during construction. So TSP is involved in that conversation. And all those threads come together into what we haven't quite got a name for it, but it'll be around deliverability, program management, thinking about sequencing, staging, cost effectiveness. And the other, probably one of the most important things is the top 5 delivery oversight group, which is a joint initiative with Whakatahi and TCC, focused on the delivery of the significant projects in the sub-region, including Tariko, Hewlett's Road, 15th Ave, PEI, and Cameron Road, stage 2. It's not a governance group, it's an oversight group. It's made up of experts that are able to provide assurance to the funders and the asset owners on delivery. So all of this we're going to be integrating with the Smart Growth Implementation Funding Plan. So I've been talking with Craig about how we're going to do that. So we want to make sure that we're joined at the hip on that. And the last point I was going to make is we talked at the Joint PT Committee around transport governance. So that's an early conversation that hasn't even started yet, but we'll be looking at how we ensure that TSP is integrated properly in a governance way. So they were the points I have to make. Anything further that you want to know? Or?
So in terms of consistency, in theory, because TSOF is inputting into RLTP and the LTP programs, there should be consistency between the TSP and TSOF work and those documents as well.
100%. Oh, yeah.
Now, I say should be because I'm aware that, there are other considerations and constraints that play into this space as well.
Yes, and the RLTP is a regional transport prioritisation process. So we worked very closely through last year with the RLTP team. We did our investment logic mapping before the RLTP team. So they had our work as an input to developing their investment logic map. And so there is consistency there, but because it's a wider area, it's the regional approach, it needs to factor in the different priorities that are regional by nature. So, there was also overlap between the technical specialists that worked in TSOF and were in the regional advisory group, the RAG, who did all the technical advice to the committee, the transport committee.
Just, if I may, Mr. Chair, just to be clear on this, So TSP inputted but weren't part of, sat alongside the RAG.
They were, yeah, yes.
Okay.
They were, TSP was represented in the RAG.
Oh, you were.
And it wasn't, there were TCC staff and regional council staff that were both working on TSOF and TSP, and they were in the RAG. But they weren't there as TSP representatives, they were there as representatives of their organisation. So they knew the technical overlaps, but they were putting their organisational hat on. And at times, there were two RAG meetings where I went and talked about the work that TSP was doing on TSOF. Does that make sense in terms of the overlap? And so there was clear overlap and alignment through that process. And when you look at the output for the RLTP, you can see the alignment on the projects that have come through as priorities.
Yeah, I mean, the clear priorities are the sub-region, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what I've taken from your korero, Sean, is that really the challenge going ahead, apart from systemic matters, like where TSP actually sits and its accountability and all of that, is how on earth is all of this going to get delivered?
Yes.
And what I heard you say is that that's a work in progress for this particular calendar year. Is that right?
Yes.
So are you swimming like Kauai with the oversight group of the 5 major TCC projects?
Yes.
In terms of that deliverability?
Yeah. The top 5 oversight group has just come into the swimming lane, so we're just working out how to swim in the same direction.
Are they the shark or the tadpole?
Yeah. It's a big
Okay.
Kauai, so
Right.
we'll work out how to align. We've had a session. I've had a meeting with Neil, who's the program director, and they've just recently had their kick-off sessions. So we're still working out where that integration happens, because they'll have, everyone has their roles and responsibilities, and it's about making sure that we understand where the linkages are so that we can work really effectively. So we're definitely working through that.
There's going to be the 10-year regional transport projects that are in that priority, which are not part of, they might be, some of them might be those top 5, but there's others. It seems to me to be absolutely critical that we have an absolute integrated deliverability approach here. I have to say, Mr. Chairman, that for my very small and ageing brain, this is very hard. It's very complex at first blush, and it just strikes me as a diagram would be good, but it just strikes me this is awfully complex, and I understand it has to be complex because of the nature of what we're delivering, but goodness gracious.
It is complex, and last year, this is my thinking on this. Last year there was a lot of planning, and there's always overlaps, but there was a significant planning effort. And this year, since the beginning of this year, almost everything I'm thinking about is how do we do this in a way that's going to be really exactly what you're talking about, and how do we deliver this? And what's going to happen is that we'll keep working through this. We're doing it in partnership, in collaboration, and we will get to a point where it sounds very simple. And if we can get there, then it means that we've managed to deal with the complexity. That's what we're aiming for, but we just haven't got quite there yet. So we've got our TSP governance group next week, and we've got some good cross-organisational meetings happening.
Cool. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sorry to...
No, that's fine.
Well, I won't apologise for being so domineering, but that is who I am.
I'm not in a rush.
Okay. So you continually reference we. So who is the we of TSP? So you mentioned a governance group.
Yeah, so, okay, that's a good question. So we've got Dean Kimpton as the independent chair. Dean doesn't spend a great deal of time because of his role in Auckland, but when he gets involved, I talk with him regularly to keep him abreast of the issues that are going on. And then when he comes in, he's able to guide that discussion in an independent way. So he's highly effective when he applies his time here. And then we have the TSP governance group, which has representatives from the partnership. And there's 8 organisations in the partnership. So you have the regional council, 2 city council, district council, and NZTA. They're the asset owner, operator that are involved in TSP. And then you have ports, Kiwi Rail, tangata whenua representation, and Priority One. So there's representatives from each of those organisations that sit at the governance group, and I attend that as well. From Regional Council, Mike attends that group, and Jess Andrew, Robin Alston. There's a whole list of people, so I won't run through them. And then under that, and that meeting happens bi-monthly, and Dean sits on SLG and the Smartgrowth Implementation Group, and I will often sit in his place on SGIG. And then under that we have the Partner Management Group, PMG, and we meet monthly, and that includes the Mike Seaborn, Director of Transport, Jess Andrew, Head of Transport at TCC, which is Nick Johansson, acting in that role, and then Representative Jim and from Western Bay, and others from the other agencies. And at that meeting, that's starting to get pretty tactical. So it's strategic in the transport sense, but it is how are we going to be delivering what we're doing. So and then we're going to be doing quarterly reports into Smartgrowth to make sure that we're getting that consistent and alignment. So over the time I've been involved, we've become more joined up with Smartgrowth and more integrated in how we're reporting. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, fine, but presumably you now need to get the oversight Kawai hooked in to whatever level of that which you've just explained is appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
And so that I think what will happen is that the TSP setup as it stands will probably not change so much, but how it sits in the context of the wider governance arrangements is something that was given back to us the other day, that joint PT committee, around how do we best set ourselves up for success going forward. And that's a conversation that we're going to have next week before governance, just with Jess and Mike and Nick and Dean. See if we can come up with something that'll work well.
Good.
Can I just say thank you? You're so calm. This has done my head in, but wonderful. Thank you so much.
So just lifting the discussion up to a slightly higher level, you've given us a lot of detail this morning, but if what we were concerned about, and the reason that we asked you to come in this morning, was that we were concerned there was a risk that there wasn't a joined up approach here, or there was a risk that there were conflicting priorities here, or that there were timing and sequencing issues that wouldn't play out well, or there was a risk of information not being shared. The structures and the systems that you've described, are they working to set aside those risks and those concerns?
If we didn't have TSP, we'd have to have something different, and it would eventually look like TSP. And so the way that we partner and collaborate is working well, and it relies on the people involved to be able to share and to partner and do that in a way that's cognizant of all the conflicting priorities that everyone has. So I think that it's working well.
And in terms of the integration with Smartgrowth, You obviously attend a number of our meetings and you provide a quarterly report to SLG.
Yeah.
So we're getting, I mean, the way that the work that you've described is integrated and reporting into Smartgrowth, you're confident that that's effective and that we know what we need to know at the times we need to know it and we can integrate it into our own thinking in that way?
Yeah, I think it can improve. That's what my plan is this year, to try and get that working better. It'll work better when we've got better governance and clear. But the other thing is there's some real constraints like the funding and financing, the market capacity, and there'll be others that are systemic, fundamental issues that the organisation of TSP is not going to solve. So the way that we organise ourselves, but getting visibility into what we can do and what the output and the outcome of doing that would be, and what are the marginal opportunity if we were able to, if we can get visibility into that, it's going to inform decision making. So that's sort of where our focus is trying to do as much as we can to support that.
Yeah, affordability and deliverability are two challenges or constraints that are just part of the environment that we're working in. One final question from me, and then I'll check whether other panel members have got anything they want to raise as well. We're obviously in a period of significant policy change, central government policy change, and that will lead to different funding for different projects than perhaps we might have envisaged when we were looking at this a year ago. How does that play into what you've described?
Yeah, that's a good point. And once the draft GPS comes out, that will be part of the first activity that we'll be doing, which is integrating into TSOF the various changes that have happened, because there's been a lot of big changes. So GPS priorities will change. It won't, because this is a strategic growth approach for the sub-region. It's not at the whim of government change to a large extent. So, what I envision is that we'll look. We've got our investment logic map. We understand our priorities and we understand our weightings that we've put on those, and we look at our priorities. So it's probably the weightings that will get tweaked, and then it might be a timing and sequencing question around when you can deliver certain aspects of infrastructure.
Okay.
For example, walking and cycling may be deprioritised on certain areas where it's going to not fit the GPS priorities. But other areas it will. Like there'll still have to be walking and cycling, because you can't create a multimodal transport system without it. So, but it has to be where there's best bang for buck. If you're going to spend money on it, you want to be getting some productive outcomes. So that's how I think the GPS, the government priorities will affect what we're doing.
Yep.
Not fundamental, but more that prioritisation, sequencing and timing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Bill.
I'd just like to follow on from Sean's comment. At the end of the day, it's what's best looking out and ahead for the sub-region. And I think just reiterating, government policy statements come and go, governments come and go, but at the end of the day, fine, as a sub-region we need to pivot to whatever that environment may be, but it's still keeping the view out there in what is needed and what is best and appropriate for the Western Bay sub-region. And I think that's really important, because it's about responding in terms of our needs and aspirations, as opposed to whatever may be flavour of the month in terms of some policy direction.
Any other questions or matters people want to raise for discussion while we've got Sean in the room?
I've got one idea, just share it and see what people think.
Yep.
Through the strategy, there are Yeah, through the strategy where there's several case studies used to illustrate general points, or I'm wondering about the implementation chapter, the potential to have a TSP case study to illustrate that as what are the kind of on the ground components of that, because it is talked about a lot, but there's nowhere that kind of describes it. And some of the description that Sean's given around how it works and how it integrates may be a way of giving more visibility to that. It's not part of the strategy, but it's.
I think that could be useful.
As an idea.
And to have something, I mean, Paula talked about whether there was the opportunity for a visual representation of this, a diagram, but maybe a description, a visual representation, a description of what it is and how it's intended to work, and a case study that illustrates that. I think could be really good.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And apropos of our discussions yesterday, I think the same could apply to the housing system plan and the housing action group, because equally there's a kind of orphan-like feel about it at the moment. So if we could look at ways of bringing TSP that greater visibility, and same for the housing system and action plan, I think it would be really good.
And the very act of needing to depict the housing system in that way will lead us to the conversations that we need to have to define it. So that'll be really useful, as well as being really helpful with the end result.
Just a final comment from me that just came to mind. So over the next sort of 10 years plus, there's going to be a significant amount of transport investment made and a lot of disruption, and how we manage the conversation with the community is going to be really essential. So we're spending time thinking about that as well. That's top of mind, making sure that we can build a fit-for-purpose transport system for the future without breaking the transport system for 10 years while we do it. So there's a challenge.
And looking at recent days' media, there are some examples of some frustrations that are arising as exactly the result of things taking longer, deliverability issues, weather-related issues, all of that. And clearly, it's those sort of things that you're hoping to avoid.
Yeah.
All right, look, Sean, thanks very much indeed for joining us at short notice this morning. Thanks for a really helpful presentation of the work that you do and the work that you're involved in. I think that's given the panel a level of comfort based on some of the discussions that we were having yesterday, and I'm pleased that that's the case. And certainly looking at the way that we can wrap something into the implementation work that allows what we've had the benefit of this morning to be clearly articulated through that document as well, I think will be really useful. So, yeah, appreciate you joined us at short notice, and thanks for some really good input into our meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're now, if we wanted to, actually, we're now at an appropriate point if we wanted just to take a 5-minute coffee break. And let's make it just, what are we at, 10:44. Let's come back at, if we come back at 5:02, so that gives us 10 minutes. That'll allow the team to get ready for the next part of what we're going to do, which is the report back on yesterday, and really closing out those outstanding matters from yesterday as we can, maybe referring any matters that we can't close out today to a further discussion in the future yet to be determined, and we'll think about how that folds into our recommendation resolutions. But really, we're now moving into the final part of just closing out outstanding issues so that we can then move to agreeing the wording of what it is we're resolving and passing some formal resolutions in the next little while. So let's take a 10-minute break, come back at 5 to 11. Let's make sure that we're absolutely on time because we've got quite a lot still to get through, and we're really then moving into the closing phases of the important work that we're doing. So we'll adjourn till 5 to 11. Next part of the meeting. All right, so Craig, do you want to take us through how we're going to handle the various issues that we set aside from yesterday, that we asked for more information on, where we were asking for confirmation of wording changes, further information, other matters that we wanted reported back to this meeting today? Very aware, as I said, there's a huge amount of work gone overnight. I'll hand over to you, Craig, so that you can talk us through what you've done and your proposal for what happens next.
Work was done by the topic leads overnight, updating reports with amendments, so we've got a paper trail on everything that's been discussed. I think I've reviewed everything, but I can't absolutely guarantee that, because by 8 o'clock this morning I had to kind of put a line under it and say that's it. So that information is then also been picked up and put into a sort of draft minutes or decision. So what I think what the intention is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but we're going to put up the amended IOPs and look at the changes and indicate comfort or whatever with the rewording, and then we'll go to, on that topic, we'll go to the decision document. So the items, rather than, we'll do it topic by topic. We think that's probably the best way to do it. If I got that right? Yeah.
Can you give us page numbers when you want us to go to?
I think we've been using these updated ones in this handout.
So these pink documents, just to clarify, these are the IOPs updated with the new information that's about to be presented to us.
That's correct. So these are your updated IOPs. So you'll see on the front page you've got the topic. See, this one, for example, is Housing IOP number 8. So I've just handed out, yesterday on day 1 you got 2 addendums, you got 1 and 2, and I've just handed out 3 through to 8, and there are a few more coming as well.
Okay.
All right, so let's then work through these chapter by chapter, IOP by IOP, and what we're going to be doing is approving the changes, or the expectation is that we'll be approving the changes, although there's opportunity for discussion obviously as well, which will then agree the matters that we set aside yesterday, or allow us to have the discussions that we would have had yesterday had we had this information in front of us then. So, Craig, do you want to take us through these and call on other people as you need to do as we go? And let's just work through them one by one. The aim being to decide on the new information, agree the changes that have been made. All of that then gets captured in the resolutions that we'll be passing before the end of the session.
Yes. So the first one we'll just do them in the order. So we'll start with the tangata whenua, number 3.
Tangata whenua, table item 3.
So the new material is, which are the page numbers, towards the back. So this is just the PowerPoint presentation. So just to clarify, this is just the PowerPoint, not the IOP document.
Yeah, that's correct. So we do have Alva on the line. I'm not sure if that full IOP has been updated yet, Alva?
Yeah, it has been.
It's on the shared drive. It's
Oh
been
yeah,
there
okay, I'll just bring that up 1 second. I'm not sure if we have it printed yet, hang on.
All right, so should we leave this one till later so that we can get the printed copy of the actual IOP? Because, yeah, that was one of the issues yesterday, was that we were seeing this for the first time by way of the PowerPoint presentation. We were keen, if we can get it on screen, that'll be perfect. Let's do it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, this is exactly what we were looking for, was the information presented in the same way as the other IOPs.
So while we scroll down to the relevant part, so as a reminder, yesterday I presented some new information about concerns raised at the meeting of Te Marua Kaitana, or TIMIC, and at that time I hadn't had a chance to incorporate this new issue and potential matters to address. So in a nutshell, they relate to the lack of visibility of co-governance partnerships within the strategy, as well as the lack of visibility of co-governance documents within the strategy. So they relate to this term that I used a lot yesterday, which is cultural redress outcomes. And so, as discussed, there's an existing issue within the Tangata Whenua section of the strategy, which only talks about commercial redress. And so one of the challenges with such a narrow focus is it potentially gives that impression that commercial redress is the only thing within a treaty settlement that Smartgrowth is interested in. And so I've updated the issues and options paper to reflect this new issue. I've also included additional context within this document about the treaty settlements that we have within the sub-region, what co-governance partnerships we have in place already, as well as what co-governance documents that we have within the sub-region. So that's that additional context. I know for you, Paula, that was definitely missing of, how big a scale are we talking? So if we can scroll down a little bit further down to the options. There we go.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to read about cultural redress.
So if we go to new option 3A, so I've presented two options. So 3A is about making some amendments, 3 amendments specifically. And then the second option is to make no changes. And so in the new 3A, I've included the wording for new challenge 8, which I shared on the presentation slide yesterday. And if we can scroll through to the second suggested change, there's a few amendments that need to be made. Oh, if we could go up. And then there's a few amendments that need to be made on figure 2 on page 82. So that was like a wheel spoke diagram of the various documents that connect with the Te Taiao chapter. And this was just about listing all of our existing co-governance documents and acknowledging, because at that time there was only just the one, the Kaitana Action Plan. And then the final suggestion, which is around amending map 9, so that's in the Te Taiao chapter, to include the, I guess it's the overlay of all the statutory acknowledgements within the sub-region. So they often relate to rivers and streams. And so this is an essential map. And then of course, option 3B was to do nothing. So if you could scroll up to the options analysis, there's two things I wanted to share with you. So scroll up, or is it down? Must be down. Oh, can we go?
Sorry, Alva, I can't quite hear. Where do you want to get to?
Oh, to the one that shows the options analysis. So I don't know if it's down or up. The one we're doing the pros and cons. Just so it's up on the screen. This is the one. So there are a couple of key comments that I wanted to make. That's actually on the next page in relation to why we should include these amendments. There's a couple of things. So this notion of cultural redress outcomes, they're already part of our landscape. So things like statutory acknowledgements, co-governance partnerships, they already involve smart growth, local authorities, processes such as resource consents and plan development. So I guess my view is that, if we include these as an amendment, it does recognise, I guess, the full package that you find within a treaty settlement. The other thing is I ran the suggested new challenge past Ron Hooper, who works at Te Aroha City, which is the Office for Māori Crown Relations. And he was of the view that that it would be beneficial to enhance and recognise the cultural redress elements within the draft strategy. And I guess his statement probably sums it up, to say the least. So no, happy to take any questions, comments, worries.
All right, Alba, thank you, and thanks for the work that you've done overnight as well. Thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions from the panel, or is there anything that you want to see in more detail or have a read off for longer on the screen, just so that we can get to a point where we're comfortable with this? Paula.
Yeah, thank you. Would you be good enough to scroll up where the treaty, the heading is Treaty of Waitangi Settlements? Keep going. It's in red. Yep, past that. Right.
Oh, so that will refer to Appendix 1, and actually Appendix 1 would be really valuable to see on screen. So that's the snapshot of where are they, who are they, where are they at. So if we could scroll back to the Appendix 1, which is right at the end, because that gives you a bit of a snapshot of the lay of the land. There we are, that page. Oh. And if you scroll up a little bit, so that's our existing site. So this table summarises all of the settlements that we have within the sub-region. Some have settled, so of course there's legislation in place, and then there's some that are just waiting their further readings within Parliament. And then the table underneath summarises our existing. So if you carry on down further. Can you scroll down a little bit underneath this table? And then this one summarises the co-governance partnerships we have in place and their associated documents.
So after people have finished reading this, you're up and down, would you be good enough to go back to that red section, which just talks about Treaty of Waitangi and what cultural redress? Yeah.
Yep, so shall we go back up to that red wording now? And then, Paula, you just wanted the opportunity to read that on the screen. Yeah,
please.
So it's reading, so down a little bit, reading the difference between commercial redress and cultural redress. So understanding what they are in practice.
Thank you.
So is this the wording?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep, great. All right, so let's take the opportunity to read this.
And maybe the core difference between the two redress sites, you look at, say, for commercial redress, it's about having land and money to be able to develop and use and do. On the other hand, cultural redress is often around protecting and enhancing certain areas. So, they've got quite a different purpose. And so just making sure that we aren't just talking about the commercial redress side, we've got to also include the other sites, which actually fit quite nicely, align with a lot of the factors within Te Taiao chapter.
All right, so there's quite a lot of extra detail here. Is there anything else that panel members are wanting to look at in more depth, or any questions or anything that people want to raise?
I guess from my point of view, Mr. Chairman, it's a matter of understanding the implications. I absolutely get, and I think it was helpful to have the kaituna example brought before us, a clear oversight, I guess. But I'm just trying to understand what are the practical implications, particularly if you look at Tauranga Moana, yet to be settled. And I'm not sure whether their legislation, which is currently sitting waiting to be introduced into the House, addresses cultural redress. Can you help me there, Elva?
Correct. So every treaty settlement would include cultural redress and commercial redress. So, for example, the Tauranga Moana governance, the governance group that's underway, or that is currently like the Tauranga Harbour Advisory Group, that is a form of cultural redress. And so it's just making sure that the strategy in itself doesn't forget that there's two kinds of redress. But then, like, I imagine you're talking about, like, what are the implications at an implementation level, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think I am.
Yeah.
But thank you for the explanation, because we know we're going to get a co-governance body for Tauranga Moana. Are there likely to be other issues of cultural redress which will be included? I'm not sure if that act is complete.
So these are similar to a lot of the other settlements. So they'll have things like statutory acknowledgements, which will impact things like resource consent processes. They'll have the return of, former dock sites, also place name changes. So there's a lot of the packages are all kind of similar. They have cultural redress, commercial, financial, but what each one looks like is different. And I think at a implementation level, knowing that you've got these co-governance partnerships in place, which is a form of cultural redress, you're having a lot of those discussions within those partnerships anyway. So I know that TCC and Western Bay regularly take reports of relevance to the Tauranga Harbour Advisory Group, like those with the Regional Council. So in a way, we're kind of, by acknowledging cultural redress in this, we're acknowledging the landscape that we're already working in.
Thank you. Anything from any other panel members? Bill?
Thanks, Chair. And my comments actually relate to the wording in Challenge 7. In the last sentence, it will be essential that smart growth is cognizant of these land blocks to ensure the aspirations for land development are not hampered by infrastructure or regulatory processes. I'm not too sure about that wording.
Where is that written?
Challenge, the last sentence in Challenge 7. It is, but just what does that actually mean in reality, and is that beyond the smart growth mandate?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up the wording, because what you've read out is different from what I had. I had that land development does not undermine the integrity and intent of the settlement.
Sorry, can we get a page reference to put up on the screen?
So this is on page 63 of the strategy. Yeah.
Oh, so that's existing issue 7. Sorry, that's in relation to commercial redress.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Oh, okay.
So.
And Bill, you're referring to the last sentence in that paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I guess the context for everyone, this was shared on that slide yesterday. So I think that's the slide that's in front of you, the slide pack that you've got in front of you, maybe. Okay, so now that we're up to speed, so Bill, can you repeat your question again?
Well, in terms of what is in that last sentence, that land development aspirations for land development are not hampered by infrastructure or regulatory processes. Well,
I imagine it's the same thought process as for Māori land as well. So, you know, whether there's particular challenges with zoning or if they can't develop the land from, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not talking about a specific treaty settlement in particular, but say if there's a forestry plot that, and then they're wanting to redevelop it into something else, that they're not caught out by unintended policy, whether it's special significant natural areas or they can't get infrastructure to the site. So I guess it's kind of similar to Māori land in that you want to be doing things to enable social and cultural and economic well-being, but you're not hampered by all these additional overlays or constraints.
But equally, it could apply to general land, and whether that is imposing obligations that at the end of the day will be considered more on a case-by-case basis by a particular local authority at the time. That's
absolutely.
So that's the concern I have.
Yeah. And so this is a similar approach that was taken up in Auckland through the Auckland Unitary Plan, where you have a lot of redress sites that have been returned to taonga whenua, especially, and they're just covered in overlays where pre-settlement it didn't matter, but then you've got this land returned that you want, it was returned for use, but you can't use it. So I think it's just, I guess as you were saying, it's applied on a case-by-case basis.
Is there a change to that wording?
Well, I've just
that you're looking for. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you would have the new wording, but something. I mean, I'm almost wondering whether we would look at changing that to, you know, it would be essential that smart growth is cognizant of these matters when considering these land blocks or something of that nature. It softens it a little bit, but it doesn't actually take anything away.
You can't. I don't think the strategy can constrain decisions, Council. Yeah, you can't. You can't. It's not appropriate to have this document constrain decisions under other statutes.
Yes.
I think it does need to say something like takes into account, which is the language out of the RMA, something aligned to that, so it's consistent. Yeah. And I don't think it takes away from the intention of what's here at all, but I think, that could be misinterpreted as a carte blanche, and I don't think that's the intention.
Yeah. So have you got wording, or could wording be put together that we could agree today so that we can wrap it in today's resolutions, or is that something that you want to take away?
Replace are not hampered by, you take those 4 words out and say are taken into account in. I don't think it's that difficult. But,
all right, so we're taking out the word, so this is in paragraph 7 on page 63. We're taking out the words are not hampered by, and we're replacing them with
are taken into account
by infrastructure
or by infrastructure or regulatory processes.
Yeah.
I'd be
Are taken into account.
much happier with
Yep.
Chair.
It's brilliant,
So-
thank you.
So, Elva, you're comfortable with what we're suggesting there?
Absolutely.
Panel members are comfortable with that change? So we'll adopt that change then, that's great. And just looking at our support staff, you've captured all of that as well?
Yes, I guess we probably need to make an amendment into this IOP document because I don't believe this point is covered in there.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so I think for transparency, it should be amended in here
All right.
/ reflected in the minutes. Otherwise, we're making an amendment to the strategy without any kind of clear basis.
So we're creating a paper trail that shows our reasoning and all right. So if the IOP document then can be amended with an additional paragraph that just describes what we've done and why, that would be good. All right, thank you. So Elva, you've got your other recommendations. Can we just scroll to the recommendations on the screen so that we can just look at the options you're putting in front of us and agree those one at a time as we have done with each of the other IOPs? So
Great.
option 2A. Oh, so where's issue 1? Let's have a look at issue 1 first. Okay, so you've talked us through these already. Partnership and participation within smart growth. Yep, so this is the one, I think we dealt with that one yesterday, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So that's already agreed, yeah. And then option two, issue 2, if I can just have it in front of me as the option itself. Okay, enabling the Murray Centres approach. And we dealt with that yesterday, so it's just issue 3 that we're discussing today. Recognition of co-governance partnerships, document, treat settlements, outcomes. So this is what we've read already. It's what we've heard the commentary on already. We've had the opportunity to ask questions and discuss. Are people comfortable with, Emily, sorry.
Can we just add a bullet point here that describes the change that you want to make and references page 63 of the strategy?
Yep, absolutely. Do you want to do that now before we agree?
Yes.
Yep, all right. So let's just wait for that change to be made, and then, assuming everyone's comfortable, we're in a position to agree this. Do you need to borrow some of mine? Do we need to launch an inquiry into the lack of Macintoshes? Okay, so amend page 63 of the draft Smart Growth strategy to replace is not hampered by to taken into account.
Could we also add the specific issue? So issue, amend issue 7 on page 63.
So refer to issue 7, yeah.
Just so we know what part of page 63.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then just a correction of the wording, it's are not hampered by and are taken into account. Yep, are not hampered by and are taken into account. Yep, that's perfect, thank you. All right, so just checking with panel members, there are no further questions or no other issues that people want to raise. And then just checking with panel members that we're comfortable with the outcome on issue 3. So we'll approve the issue 3 changed wording and outcome, and we can move on. Elva, that was everything that you needed to present to us today?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Look, thanks for the work that you've done on this. Thanks for your advice this morning, and thanks for joining us. Thank you very much. All right, so moving on then to the next chapter. So back to you, Craig.
So it's chapter 4, areas to be protected. And so Barbara Ann has updated her IOP, and then I think just to go to the recommended decisions at the back rather than trail through that whole thing.
Yeah.
So you can see in the document there the red line changes that have been made overnight.
So this picks up the changes that we talked about yesterday, environmental benefits instead of environmental services. A number of other changes there.
Let's check out in terms of our process, in terms of tracking up the last chapter, what do we need to do anything now?
Yeah, so you need to pass the substantive recommendations first before you move into the by issue consideration.
So just,
And then you need to also confirm your reasons for the decision for each of these topic areas as well.
So in terms of so this really is concluding the work that we didn't finish yesterday. And then once we've got all of the, once we have taken a position on all of the options that have been put in front of us in the IOPs, then we can wrap the whole lot together. So to do the work on this, to bring it into line with the other IOPs that we've concluded our decision making on, what do we need to do now? Approve the amended options.
So if it's your intention to now work through each issue and the subsequent options and resolve your position in relation to each of those.
That's right.
Yes, okay, same page. We need to, you need to consider the broader recommendations first.
Yep.
Because that has the introductory recommendation that the then subsequent specific issues and options follow.
Yeah,
Can
sure.
we put that up on the screen now?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, right,
Yep.
excellent.
Yeah.
These are the recommendations that came out of my report about receiving submissions and all that, because that hasn't.
No.
well,
No, not yet. Is it?
I think that's
All
what
we're doing with these papers in front of us at the moment is exactly the same as we did yesterday. And then we're going to pick up the broader recommendations about receiving the submissions and the minutes and all of that, and then adopting the changes that are set out in a schedule, which then form the recommendations to SLG. But all we're doing at the moment is bringing these chapters up to speed with the chapters that we dealt with yesterday, which are concluded. We're still concluding yesterday's work, essentially.
So we're effectively going to go through the issues and options twice in terms of rechecking them now and then resolving them in a subsequent sweep through. Is that what you're saying?
It's just checking the changes that they address the issues that we raised yesterday, so that we can then approve those in the way that we approved options yesterday. And then all of that is a body of work that we approve by way of resolution at the end.
Okay, I think normally our process would be to do each issue and option one by one as you go and resolve those. But if you wish to do them as a block, then that's your call.
Okay, maybe I'm not making myself clear. We didn't resolve. So yesterday, were you taking that as we were resolving each issue and option as we went through?
We didn't pass, there were no resolutions passed.
No, exactly.
Yes.
So my view would be that we're not passing any resolutions now.
Okay.
We're resolving issues and options that are outstanding in the way we did yesterday, and then we'll be passing resolutions at the end once we've completed that work.
Okay, that's fine. I obviously didn't explain myself clearly before because I had the opposite understanding.
Right, okay.
Okay,
Can I just confirm that we're all on the same page now?
I'd like to think so.
Excellent, thank you. Good. Okay. All right, so Craig, do you want to just take us through then these? I mean, we don't need to go back through the ones we did yesterday. Some of them are just small wording changes or just additional information.
And certainly with this one,
Just the outstanding stuff.
Barbara Ann's done, I think those are pretty, if the changes are there, they seem fine. I don't know whether we need to work through them.
So
blow
all
by
we
blow,
need to,
but
all we need to do is to confirm that we're happy with the changes
I
that have
think
been
so.
made.
In this case,
Yeah.
unless there's any concerns, they all seem fine to me. So.
All right, so just checking in with other members of the panel that we're happy with the changes that have been made. Excellent, thank you. All right, so that's tabled item 4. Tabled item 5, climate resilience.
Similar thing where Manini has gone through and updated the IOP. So you go to the back, the last 2 pages with the recommended decision. And I think the main issue that came up was this wording in that paragraph around central government involvement in the managed retreat. So you can see the wording there, which I worked with Manini on that last night. That talks about with policy and funding support from central government to facilitate the process of clear expectations and outcomes. So hopefully that's captured the issue that was raised yesterday.
That's the most substantive one. The others are just really small writing by committee type of wording changes, just some small corrections. So again, we just need to confirm that we're comfortable with the changes that have been made. Yep. Okay, so just checking in, everybody's happy.
Just wonder if the word funding is appropriate or whether we should have a wider resources in there. Clear expectations and adequate resourcing.
So resourcing rather than funding.
Resourcing's wider.
It's broader and includes funding. I could be in agreement with that. Yep. All right, so let's then change in option 1B, change the word funding to the word resources in the red wording. Adequate resource. Come on, yeah, it should be option 1B. Something wrong here. So what I've got is red wording in a blue box, recommended option 1B.
Oh, that, yeah. I can see what's happened. After discussion with Manini, I changed the decision at the end. It didn't go back and update the IOP, so it's my fault. So, yeah, we'll align that IOP to be consistent with that. That's the issue. It's just a minor, it's just a consequential change. I didn't realise it was in two places.
Okay,
So what we're looking at is this red wording, ideally with support from central government to help facilitate a process with clear expectations and adequate resourcing, rather than funding. That's in this section here.
It's the word, not, yeah, that, it's the decision part that's the go-to.
Right.
If we just use that, if we get that right, if we're happy with that wording, we'll make sure that the preceding part of the report includes exactly the same word.
So with policy and resourcing support from central government, yep, and that's what we've got here. That's right?
That's just
so that's amended.
We'll tidy up the report. I don't think we need to make a decision on the IOP itself.
No, you're right.
Just the decision.
Yep. Yeah. All right, that's good. So with that change made, we're comfortable with the changes made here, and we're happy to approve those options.
Yep.
Yep, great. Thank you. So that sets item 5 aside. Tabled item 6, so future development strategy, or do you want to leave that one till the end and deal with housing first?
But the FDS one I don't think is printed yet, is it? Oh, it is, okay, yeah.
Just, go with the FDS one now.
All right, so
Yes,
go
we can
FDS
do
next
that.
then. Yep, that's fine.
So Nicole's done most of the work, so she's here and can take us through that. If that's, is it
Yeah.
okay, Nicole?
So Nicola, do you want to present this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you comfortable working from there, or do you want to come and join us at the table?
Oh, I'm all right here, if that's okay.
All right.
Just when Tracy comes back, I might get her to put up on screen. There's just a few changes.
I think Nicole, we just
Yeah.
probably best to go to the decisions pages at the back. Right?
Yes,
and
yeah,
if
so I
there's
think Tracy, page 43, where the decisions start, we can just track through. 43, yeah, of the IOP.
So just for clarity, to help us expedite this, we should all go to the end of these reports and just look at the recommended decisions.
I think that's the most effective way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, yeah.
That was where I got caught up on the last one. I was looking at the supporting
And I think
information.
if there's anything changes, I think we just generally assume that we'll go back and tidy up any consequential.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you know, we're working in an environment where there's a high level of trust. As long as we make our needs clear, then we can trust that that'll be picked up.
And
all right,
just
great.
before you launch into it, Nicola, what's the difference between red and blue?
Blue is me.
Oh, yes, Craig and I have both updated this, so, but where you see any track change, that's, yeah, that's,
Gotcha.
that's
Track changes
changes.
are overnight. Blue me and red Nicole.
All right, so with a focus then on the recommended decisions at the end of the document, let's, Nicola, do you just want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so I think the first one that Tracy's just bringing up is on that infrastructure readiness. And so we've added text there around the Western Corridor transport improvements, just to note that they have that wider impact around enabling business land, but also the important connections to the port as well as a freight route. So that's that text in there. And then I think that Craig,
I'll speak to that.
yeah.
I added this in because from the discussion we had yesterday about better showing the implementation components and the mapping of corridors and the infrastructure that associates to those, and also the issue around the funding gap for each corridor, rather than having it in the strategy, because of course that gap will change over time. So I thought best not to have it in there, be a separate document. So potentially in the implementation plan, it's somewhere on the Smartgrowth website or wherever, just as supporting information.
So we're comfortable then with the recommended decision on issue 2? Yep. All right, so we can set issue 2 aside. That's great, thank you.
I think the next changes we jump down to issue 6.1 and Tutumu.
This is, I'll pick that up. That's
Yes, I think so. I think that's right. I think, Craig, you added the wording in here. Maybe just scroll down a little bit further. I understand it's just adding more detail about Tutumu. I don't know if you want to.
The critical part here is the footnote to Tutumu, which I took the issues and options paper that TCC are dealing with, and I've created a shortened version of that I hope captures the key issues there. It's probably a little more prescriptive than other parts of the strategy, but given the nature of the issue, I felt it's appropriate around the plan change and the aim for notification by early 2026. The future proofing through provision of infrastructure through Papamoa and Wairake, and funding for infrastructure investigations, and to note the council, landowners and government working together on the issue of infrastructure funding and financial arrangements.
And what it does, and this reflects the discussion we had yesterday, this separates out the plan change issue from the infrastructure funding and development issue. So that certainly picks up the issue that was raised yesterday. Are people comfortable with that? Great. All right, thank you. So that's issue 6. We're in agreement with. That's fine. Thank you.
And from the discussions earlier, 7.1 and 7.2, we should just leave those. They both relate to Wairake South.
Yeah, let's not discuss those further today. Wairake South, we're going to take offline and then bring back for a separate discussion. We'll need to reconvene the panel for a separate discussion, probably just for a short online meeting once that work has been done. That's fine.
And that's for Tara Road as well. The issues are very similar.
Yep.
So then that takes us to 7.3, and that was residential growth in the east around those villages.
Yep.
And Tracy, I think that's on 48. We've just added some text in there around that further housing opportunities are a matter for the councils through private plan changes or resource consents. So just flagging that they can be considered that way.
Sorry, Nicola, what is the definition of a potential growth area?
I'll just find that we do have it in the strategy. So potential growth areas are areas that have not yet been fully investigated and or confirmed. So it's flagging that it's those areas that there's still further work to be done.
All right, so this is issue 7, so there's just been an update to those numbers there and that additional wording. Comfortable with that? Thank you. All right, issue 8.
So this one relates to Puna, and worked with Emily on some wording there, so that we're highlighting the fact that Western Bay will be doing that spatial planning work with the community and with tangata whenua.
Yep. So it's just that wording change. Are we comfortable with that?
So just, I know, just in relation to, so what will be shown on the map? It's not currently identified as longer term growth area, but in some areas it's this potential. And then down the bottom you say clarify the terminology. So out of all of this, what will it be shown as?
So it won't be on the FDS map.
Great, thank you.
So yes, 7. So that's issue 8. So we're comfortable with issue 8. Now, Craig, you were just asking for clarity around 7.7.
If we go back to 7.7, this is to do with the Eastern Corridor and Western Corridor. And I'm in the second to last page of the one.
It looks as you've got a different,
No, it's
or different part of the document.
It's repetitive, the same things.
Right, okay.
It's the
Option 7.
7. Excellent.
Here we go. Right, okay.
It's the same words. This is where I'm kind of collecting my thoughts. We've tried to reflect the wording in here to deal with the issue raised yesterday, where Waka had some concerns about not wanting to preempt or predetermine outcomes. So we thought we provided enough softening of the language, so that wasn't the case, but they still have some concerns about it. And they've actually asked for this they want to sort of review and kind of, we're not approve, but endorse it before it goes forward. There's an email I received this morning. The issue is that it's the issue to do with the Eastern and Western. We're saying, well, one or both may be needed, but their view is it should say and or, that when we can't necessarily say that both, it could be the case of only one. So it's just trying to carry that language into here. And the suggestion would be that it would have and or between, it would say Eastern Centre and or Western Corridor is a suggestion that's been made. But there were also questions around the long-term growth areas and how that's included in the plan, that they're not 100% comfortable with at this point, and have asked for time to look at that. So I asked the question whether you want to treat this like the Wairake South and take the step. We're going to have to come back to that. Let's do it here, and let's not have a partner who's feeling that the issues haven't been addressed properly. So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That's fine, but when that does come back, I'd some clear joined up advice in terms of any implications for whatever wording is chosen. If I can just make the comment that in terms of the sub-region, we need both of the corridors, so that's why I'm let's see what comes back, but really looking at some good joined up advice when it does come back of any implications.
We thought we had it joined up, but it's not quite there. And I don't think it's too much to do, but I think it just needs another conversation, which is just too hard to get done today. So
Yeah, let's deal with that the same way as the Wairaka issue from earlier then. So if you can come back to us with the result of that discussion when you've had it, when it's landed, but as Bill has asked, and absolutely right, with some appropriate advice alongside, because, well, we'll have the discussion when it comes back, but if we can get the result of your discussion and associated advice, that would be great. So we'll set that one aside for that further discussion.
Mr. Chair, I think it's really important that when this matter does come back, we have something in writing. I really want an audit trail on this matter because personally, I think it's a really big issue.
All right.
We'll come back with a report with the outcomes of the conversation and what the issues are.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. All right, so we'll set that one aside for the moment on that basis. Thank you. So issue 8, Te Puna, we just dealt with. Issue 9. So it's just this small addition here. Private plan changes must also have regard to the FDS.
Yes, that's all.
And people seem to be delighted by that, so we'll adopt that one. That's great, thank you. All right, so that was everything on FDS. Great, thank you. So the next one then is item 7, general. This should be fresher in our mind, given that we just talked about it this morning. So again, going to the back pages, the very back pages.
So it's really just the red text. So this was issue 6, and this is for the implementation and funding of, added another few words in there, it's implementation and funding plan. Where it was just noting previously, but just again, picking up on the conversations over the last day, that we cover outcomes delivered by partners and outcomes that delivered jointly, and how those arrangements interrelate with an organisation chart.
Good luck with that.
Already started.
Excellent.
Yeah. That was the suggestion there. And the final change was just picking up the issue of equity. That's at the very back. And suggesting there's no issues and options on this because there weren't any submissions on it, but I need to kind of just figure out how to close that out. But just getting to the decision component, had a look across the whole strategy to see, where the term equity or equitable was used, and it doesn't come up too much. I found it in 4 different places, primarily in relation to tangata whenua inequities and deprivation, but we already identified previously this the resilience issue that came up yesterday, and there's also a reference to it in the benefits of long-term planning. So I suggesting that we take the wording that came through from the social infrastructure issues and options paper, and if we were happy with that the kind of issues that were, or the approach taken there, say that equity means a consistent approach, but one that considers local needs and issues, but have that up front in the benefit, because there is a commentary on benefits of long-term planning that refer to equity. And I thought perhaps to expand on that there at the very front of the document. Say, well, here's what, in the context of smart growth, this is what equity or equitable means. There's a way forward. As opposed to putting in a definition, because it's not really a definition, it's more of a commentary on how something's applied to implementation.
Now, Paula, this was an issue that you raised yesterday. So just checking in with you on your level of comfort with what's proposed here.
An elegant solution.
So you're happy with what's put forward? Excellent. That's great. Are others also happy with this wording? Yeah. All right, Craig, thanks for doing that, because that was potentially an interesting issue, and it's one that you've resolved now. Used Paula's word quite elegantly. Thank you. All right, so we're happy with that changed wording. That's good. So that's everything on tabled item 7.
Sorry, just to keep up, is the updated wording articulated up there? Are you happy with that, or is there some wording to be provided?
Is that further, scroll down?
So I'm right at the end of the...
I'll go further down, I think, is the...
What I'm looking at is the red text at the very end of this new paper that's been provided to us.
Yeah. Has that on it?
There it is.
Yeah.
It's just to say, it's not on the rest of the issues and options paper, because I just didn't have time to populate all the various tables. So I need to go back, and as I mentioned before, I think we can accept that, you know, the issues and options papers will be revised to reflect any changes. So I need to go back and add a couple of things to the table that'll just use the same text.
So what we're agreeing now is to, in respect of issue 10, is to add the following to the benefits of long-term planning on page 15 of the strategy. So it's all of that is what we're agreeing. Yep. All right, great. Thank you. All right, so next then will be item 8, table item 8, housing. So again, if we go to the back of the document.
Can I just immediately pick up that Quayside hasn't been taken out in the decisions section? It's still appearing.
Yeah, this is one paper I didn't have time to review. It wasn't actually updated when I looked in the folder last night. So,
but I think we agreed to take out
Yeah.
the examples.
yeah,
We did.
that was it. I think that I don't recall any other issues. That was probably the only one.
We're taking out the examples such as BOP Housing Equity Fund and via Quayside Holdings Limited, for example.
So that wording's deleted.
Yeah.
So the wording such as BOP Housing Equity Fund and via Quayside Holdings Limited, for example,
Yeah.
is removed.
Yeah.
I just note that it has actually been amended in the option discussion box further up in the paper. It just hasn't been copied down to the decision section.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So we'll.
So if we go to the...
When should we tidy up on that one? I don't know.
Oh, here we go. So, yeah, in issue 7, in this part, it's gone. Sorry, I keep looking at different parts of these papers. Okay, so just working through these then.
So you're just going to strike that out on this. Just sort of run the line through it, I think.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, we can be confident that'll be
Yeah,
done.
absolutely.
We're happy with the wording as it's put in option 7A in the options overview part of the paper.
Strike through on that one, and it'll be done.
So Craig,
Yes,
there are just some differences between the changes in the IOPs and then the last section.
Yes, we need to line that up.
Which bit are we meant to be working from there? Because I've been working from the back part, but then this one didn't line up that
The
way.
back part is your decision.
Okay.
That's the kind of source of truth.
All right, so let's work from the back part then. So recommended decisions. It's issue 7, which we've just dealt with there.
That's been fixed.
And that's the only one, is it?
And that's been tidied up.
That's now tidied up, yeah. And that's the only one? Right, so again, I'm working from this page at the back and that's not shown
They're
there.
not strategy changes, they're just text changes.
So they're text changes
Yeah,
for
they
the
don't-
IOP that
They
we
don't
don't need to
flow, they
approve.
don't flow into the decision, it's more in the IOP itself. So that
Yeah.
was really just clarifying the,
So that's making sure that the supporting information is there for the decision that we're making. Yeah, all right, great. All right, so with issue 7 agreed, we can then move on from item 8. So tabled item 9, industrial land. So again, if we refer to the decisions that we're to make at the back. Quite a bit.
I've run out of IOPs.
Okay, so recommended decisions, issue 1. Some changes in the table here.
Nicole, can you pick this up because I've, yeah.
Do you want us to leave this one till the end, maybe, so that we can get him if we
Yeah,
want?
that might be better.
All right, let's come to this one last in that case, so I'll put that to the bottom. So tabled item 10 then is social infrastructure.
Oh, art galleries, museums, you wonderful people.
All right, so we're looking at the back of this.
It's just that,
We've just added the words art galleries, museums, theatres, exhibition centres, pools, community centre. Yeah, great.
it's just the rogue S on arts that probably needs to be taken off there.
There
It's
is
art
actually, yeah.
galleries. Yeah,
Art galleries rather than arts galleries.
I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So if we lose that S on the word arts, so it's art galleries, that reflects the discussion we had yesterday. People are happy? Yep. All right. And looks like that's the only one. So then moving on to item 11, Tangata Whenua.
Yes, anyway.
This is the one that we've done, isn't it? There's nothing new here.
Sorry,
It's-
was,
One's
sorry,
the, one's the PowerPoint. The front one was the
Ah,
PowerPoint.
right,
if you recall.
okay.
And then we ended up doing it on screen because we didn't have the printed version, so now we have it. So we've already done this.
So
one.
we've done all of this already,
Yes.
so
could I just clarify, have you made any changes to social infrastructure in the last few minutes?
It's the S on arts galleries.
Arts galleries.
So we adopted the track changes, but it was showing arts galleries and we want it to reflect art galleries. So all we're doing is removing that little S on arts. Okay? So now Tangata Whenua, are we comfortable saying, and I probably need to take some advice from our support staff, are we comfortable saying that we've done this and we made the necessary changes in the discussion we had with Elva, or do we need to formalise this now?
So I think my advice would be that you consider the rest of your recommendations, and then that has the introductory recommendation about recommending the draft strategy to the senior leadership group, inclusive of the changes that are made through these issues and options papers.
Yep.
And then you resolve through each of the issues and options papers, or take them as one big block if that's your preference.
Yeah, one big block would be good.
This means that
I
you
mean-
can't share amongst yourselves moving different items, but if you're comfortable with that approach, that's fine.
We've worked collaboratively so far, I'm sure we'll be able to resolve that issue as well. All right, that's great. So on this one, tabled item 11, we've got these recommended decisions at the back of this document, which reflect the discussion we had with Elva earlier. Do we need to deal with these as they're presented in this paper, or can we take the discussion we had with Elva and the agreement to that as having agreed to these? Maybe for formality, we just say that we accept the recommended decisions in this paper, given that they reflect the discussion that we had earlier. That's maybe the easiest way to tidy it up.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's not in this one is the challenge 7 tweak
Yeah.
that we made. But I think that's
So that'll need to be
I
incorporated.
believe that Penola has captured that little amendment that we made earlier to the Tongues of Whenua IOP in her draft minutes, which will go up on the screen when you move through making your actual resolutions.
All right, fantastic. All right, so on that basis, then, Tangata Whenua, we can say that we're comfortable with the recommendations in the back of, with the recommended options in the back of this document as a reflection of the earlier discussion with that additional change to paragraph 7. Tabled item 12, Tatayo, the environment.
Happy with all of those?
And coming back to the final pages, this bright pink paper is very different from the pale pink to look at, isn't it? Recommended decisions, environmental management plans.
Yep.
Very minor changes in this one.
Yeah. Cognizance of the impacts on natural resources is cleaner. Central gut, yeah, we just lifted this up. That's good. Yeah, this reflects our discussion yesterday well. People are happy? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we'll accept all of those. And then transport, table item 13. Coming to the back pages of this transport paper, and there are some bigger changes here. I might get Craig to take us through this one, just given that there's a little bit more change in here.
The main changes in the passenger rail, or the rail recommendations.
All right, so passenger rail.
Yeah, I mean, there are some quite good hooks already in the strategy to pick up these implementation matters, but there's a minor amendment suggested there, which is fine. And then option 3A, it's really a reference to the implementation of funding plan. Talking there about integration between FDS and transport infrastructure.
Yep, and I mean, some of this reflects the questions that we asked this morning and the discussion that we had. That's good. And then 8A looks like the next one. Option 9A. All right, are there any matters that people want to raise on any of those changes, or are there any questions? people generally comfortable, panel members generally comfortable with what's proposed?
Oh,
Ye-
superb.
Yep, I think this is a good reflection of our discussion. I'm happy with all of this.
Who wrote that?
Do you need more time to read through them just to be comfortable?
Sarah wrote that.
All good?
No, looks, the main parts are good.
All right, John, you're good with this? Yep. All right, great. So we'll adopt then the proposed changes to item 13, transport. So now we come back to industrial land. Did we find David?
I don't think he's dialed in, but I'll cover it as
Yeah,
best I
please.
can.
Thanks, Nicola. Thank you. All right, so if we go again to the pages at the back of the document.
I think Tracy, it's from page 18. If that helps. That first,
So we've got changes to the table, option 1B.
yeah, this issue I think we need to park because it crosses over with the Wairakei South matter.
All right, so let's park that alongside the other couple of issues we've parked then as well. That's good.
And then I think it's issue 2, and there's some changes in there that were raised yesterday around just recognising the health and well-being of people and the environment.
Yep, we've got that. So we're just adding those words, provided the health and well-being of people and the environment is safeguarded. Provided the health and well-being are safeguarded, it should be. Yeah, so instead of is are, so provided the health and well-being of people and the environment are safeguarded. So just with that one change. Thank you. Okay, so we're comfortable with that. Yep.
And
All
then
right.
issue 3 relates to Wairakei South, so we need to leave that one.
So park that as well, even though it's only one tiny little wording change.
Yes.
Issue
And
4.
then issue 4, and there's just some wording changes there. That's just to take out the reference to no further investigations at Apata. So, and it's just focusing on confirming Omokoroa.
Should that include Apata? Because we're confirming Mokoroa and Apata.
Yeah,
as
we've got
potential
Akaroa and
future.
Omokoroa and Apata in the table. So should option 4A include Apata as well, or just Omokoroa?
I think it probably should include both. Yeah, I just realised it isn't identified in the table as well.
Okay, so was it the intent? Was it always the intention to include both? We don't need any further advice on this now.
It's pretty clear it needs to be in there to line up with the table.
Okay, good. So let's then change this so that it lines up with the table to Omokoroa Apata as a potential future growth area for business land. This is more substantive, but people are comfortable with it. Yep, okay, great. So we'll take that one with that wording change. And then
No, I think that's all the
changes to
changes.
reasons. Yeah, no, that's fine. All right, so Nicola, nothing else that we need to do here? That's industrial land done?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that takes us through all of these updated issues and options papers.
Pull that into Wairakei South.
Yeah, the recommended reasons, there's reference to Wairakei South in there, so that'll just get pulled into the advice that comes to us on Wairakei South when that paper's produced?
Yes.
Yep. All right, great. Thank you. All right, so that then, unless there's something I've missed, takes us through all of the changes to the issues and options papers and any of those options that we hadn't previously dealt with yesterday. So just checking in from advisors and from staff that there's nothing else outstanding. There are no other issues outstanding before we start to wrap this up in some resolutions. All good? All right, great. Bill?
I'll just raise it now. I wasn't sure when to. When all the amendments are undertaken to the document, it would be good to see that latest version of the documents, so we can actually see it in a more holistic manner, because we've dealt with on a section by section basis, just before it goes forward onto agendas for any formal approval.
Yeah, what would be good would be to see a copy of the whole strategy as a final draft with the changes highlighted, so that we can read the document from cover to cover or read each chapter from end to end with the changes that have been made as a result of this whole process highlighted, and for the panel to be able to express comfort with that as a reflection of our decisions before it goes forward to SLG as the final strategy.
Yes, and we've been in touch with the graphic designer, because she's the one that's making a lot of these changes, and she's confirmed that she can also provide a version that indicates where the changes have been made.
Good.
So you can see it clearly.
Yeah, excellent. All right, no, that's good. Perfect. All right, so in the absence of any other questions from panel members or any other comments, we're now ready to move to the process of making recommendations to SLG. So we make these recommendations today. They result in changes to the strategy that we've just discussed. We've got the opportunity to review that change strategy before it goes to a final version. The recommendations that we're making today will go in front of the Smart Growth Leadership Group as an extraordinary meeting confirmed for that purpose on the 23rd of April. That does give us the benefit of time to make the changes, to be comfortable with the way that they're reflected, and to produce the documents for that meeting. And that was one of the thoughts in pushing that meeting out to April. And then we've got the three small matters, the three matters that we've set aside. They may turn out not to be small. The three matters that we've set aside from today that we're going to need to discuss in a further meeting of the panel, with decisions that will feed into the final recommendations to SLG. I think by its nature that'll need to be held as an online meeting, but it will need to be a public meeting in as much as it's an extension of these deliberations. So we'll just need to think of the logistics of that, including notification of that meeting, unless you wanted me to adjourn this meeting rather than closing it today to a time to be confirmed where we conclude this meeting online, or whether we have a further extraordinary meeting of the panel. And there might be some advice on that. I mean, if we say that's an extension of the deliberations, then it would be an adjournment of today's meeting and concluding the deliberations at an online meeting, the time and date yet to be determined. Or if we have that as an extraordinary separate deliberations meeting, or a meeting that we set up today, a meeting that we signal today, but we view it as a separate meeting just to wrap up those issues, then we can equally do that as well. We just need to think about the need to notify that meeting as a public meeting within the required LGA timeframes.
I think advice probably would be that you're better to adjourn this meeting until then, rather than setting up a separate one.
And I can adjourn to a time and place to be determined. The fact that we don't know the date or venue of the meeting as yet, and then we can just obviously make that known when it's known. All right, so we'll adjourn at the end today, but we will do as much as we can today so that it is just those outstanding issues that are dealt with at the adjournment. Okay, thank you. All right, so the resolutions. We're now going to review the way that all of the guidance that we've given, all of the indications that we've given on the options, our agreement to the options, is all going to be wrapped up into what I see as one catch-all resolution, but which for administrative purposes, each of those is a separate resolution. But I think as a panel, we can agree, given that we've agreed to them as we've gone through, we can formally agree to those together rather than going through each one individually again now. So we'll just take that as one catch-all resolution at the end. And then we've got the overall resolutions, which are to receive the submissions, to receive the minutes of the, or to receive the notes from the workshop and the notes from the site visit, and then to make the recommendations to SLG. So is there something we should have up on screen at this point to work with? Do we need to, do you want a short break to be ready for the next part, or? I'm quite happy to take a 10 minutes adjournment if you want.
Yeah, I think our lunch break's probably just about due anyway, so I don't know what you want to do in relation to that, or whether you want to move into this part of the agenda.
So what should we do? Should we take a break for lunch? Come back at, say, 12:45? Does that work? And then we'll do the concluding formalities at that point. Sorry, we were getting so close to the end, I was getting carried away. That's all good. We will adjourn then until 12:45. Thank you. People to take their seats and we'll get this next part of the meeting underway. All right, so we've got a set of draft resolutions in front of us. The proposal is that I'm moving and that Matade is seconding. So Matade, I'm assuming you're comfortable with that? Okay,
No.
great.
Sorry, just to be clear, those were the recommendations you passed.
1 and 2.
Oh, these are the ones from, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, so
So, sorry, can we go back up to the top again? So those two are the ones we passed yesterday.
correct.
Okay, so the ones we're dealing with today are here. Okay, so we received the notes from the hearings panel on Monday the 4th and Tuesday the 5th of December. So that was the actual hearings themselves. We received the notes from the pre-deliberations workshop held on the 7th and 8th of February with the clarification that where the notes refer to panel direction, this is a reference to the guidance provided to advisors and not a decision. So what we're actually asking for is that where the words panel direction occur in that draft set of minutes, that wording is changed to panel guidance. So what we're saying is the draft minutes need to be changed with the word direction removed and guidance inserted. So it's more than just noting, it's actually changing the minutes, changing the draft minutes and accepting them with those changes. I think rather than with the clarification that we just say and receives the notes and requests that.
And request.
And requests that. So instead of with a request, and requests that. Yeah, and requests that. Any reference to panel direction within the notes be replaced with panel guidance. Yep, that's good. Receives the notes from the site visit. Yep. Notes tabled items 1 to 3, which includes amendments that arose from consideration of the issues and options papers on key feedback themes. So that's all of the matters that we've been dealing with over the last 2 days, all captured. And recommends to the Smart Growth Leadership Group that the Smart Growth Strategy 24 to 74 be adopted, inclusive of the resolutions made in relation to, yeah, it's inclusive of the amendments made that the Smart Growth Strategy as a, how are we going to do this? Smart Growth Strategy as a, the Smart Growth Strategy be adopted, amended to include the resolutions made. Because it's not the resolutions that are going into the strategy, it's the amendments to the strategy resulting from those resolutions. So strategy be adopted, amended to reflect the resolutions made. Because it's the amendments to the strategy that are the important thing in this regard rather than the resolutions that sit behind them. Amended to reflect the resolutions made in relation to the respective issues and options papers. Yep, great. Okay. So are there any questions or comments on those resolutions?
Yes, Sandra, it was just in terms of we've got those 2 or 3 outstanding matters.
Yep.
Which we have yet to come back on. So I was wondering how we need to highlight that, and when we meet again to consider that, is that when we do number 7, or do we have some exception? Because we're going to have to resolve on those matters at some point.
Yeah, actually you may be right. Recommendation 7 may not be able to be, because it could be that those further matters that we consider result in further amendments to the strategy. So yeah, 7 needs to catch all of the changes, and there may be further changes yet to come. Yeah, all right. So we can do everything up to item 6. The matters that we're considering are reasonably discrete. There's not too much liens on them, but it could be that they result in further amendments to the strategy, and we need to leave that option open to us if they do. So yeah, Bill, thank you, good point. All right, so we'll leave resolution 7 then for that further meeting. I don't think we need to note anywhere that there are further matters to be considered, because in adjourning the meeting, that'll make that obvious. So in terms of resolutions 1 to 6, is there any commentary, or is there...
Our suggestion would be that you can consider recommendation 7, and then when you get to those respective 3 matters that you've indicated that you'd like to leave lying on the table, you can note at that point that they are being left to lie on the table to be considered at a re-adjourned meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we add, okay, so that'll be a further resolution, just a noting provision then here. Notes that there are 3 outstanding matters to be considered at an adjournment of this meeting. So this is just a noting provision.
The concern I have is you consider those matters. If there are some other subsequent amendments, we then go through a whole process. That's why I'm cautious about doing 7, Andrew, at this point.
That would be that would certainly be a disadvantage of doing what's been recommended. Is there a problem is there a problem with doing, as Bill's suggesting, leaving recommendation 7 until the adjourned meeting? Like if we chose to do it that way, is that workable? Given that given that the further meeting is a reconvened version of this meeting, so it would still be in the same meeting that we were doing it.
So if you don't pass recommendation 7 today, suggested, you're essentially not resolving any of the IOPs from today, because that 7 recommendation captures the adoption of all of those.
All right, so maybe in our noting provision, we just note that there are a small number of matters still to be considered as an adjournment of this meeting, and it's acknowledged that these may result in further amendments to the strategy. And that then sets up a framework at least for that.
Just, sorry, just trying to find our way through this. I think the other option is that you would have, if there are further consequential changes to other issues and options, I'd suggest you could do a report to that re-adjourned meeting that outlines where those have been affected and what those updated matters would be.
So we pass those further resolutions at that time.
Yes, I believe so.
And we don't need to preempt any of that or acknowledge it today.
I think you can just say that they're lying on the table until a re-adjourned meeting.
Yeah, all right. So we just note that a small number of matters are left to be resolved, to be considered as an adjournment of this. So I think maybe noting that a small number of matters are yet to be resolved. So are yet to be resolved. At an adjournment of this meeting, a re-adjourned meeting, yeah, okay. As a re-adjourned meeting. And I think reconvened meeting, yeah. Thank you. And that implies, I don't think we need to go further than that, do we? That implies that there may be further decisions to be made. Reconvene meeting of the panel, yeah. There's a date to be notified. Yeah, and I think that's good. It just adds to the story if anybody's looking at this, and it leaves the door open for us to make any further decisions at that time, and the effect of those decisions will be whatever it is at the time. Okay, that's good. Bill, are you happy with that as a way forward?
Yes, provided there are no impediments to any subsequent changes that may arise from considering those outstanding matters. So
yeah.
On that basis, that's fine. And I presume there will be no responses to anyone until we have completed our deliberations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the deliberations are not complete until we close this meeting and its reconvened versions of this meeting at that time.
Sorry, I'm sitting behind a giant screen. I realise I'm sitting behind a giant screen, sorry. I think your other option too is that you don't pass any IOPs today, you do all of them at your re-adjourned meeting. That's your other option, if you would prefer to do that.
That might be more sensible. Yeah, that might be more sensible. That way, if there's anything that ends up being changed as a result of the discussions at the re-adjourned meeting, at the reconvened meeting, we can pick that up. All right, which leaves us feeling a little bit incomplete today, but that's because we are incomplete today because we've still got more work to do. Yep, all right. There seems to be a general view that that's the way to go. I think that's a far tidier outcome, actually. Yep. All right, so we just deal with items 1 to 6 today and not item 7, which I think is where we started this discussion. That's good. Okay. So is there anything in resolutions 3 to 6 that people want to ask questions on or that need further guidance on? All right, great. So I'm happy to move those resolutions. Do I have a seconder? John, you'll second? Great. All right. Is there any discussion before we pass these resolutions? I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to everyone that's been involved in this process. The community members who've engaged, who've written submissions, who've come along to the hearings and shared their views with us. I'd like to thank all of the staff across a number of organisations that have supported a really good process. I've certainly felt very well supported right the way through. The word complexity was used a number of times in our discussions today, and it certainly is a very complex set of information we're dealing with. Smart growth itself is complex, and the process we've been through has been a complex one. So certainly acknowledge all the work that's gone into this. I'd also like to acknowledge the panel members and their commitment, not only over the last 2 days, but over the various the site visits and the various workshops and meetings and so on that have led to this position today. Whilst it's with some disappointment that we haven't managed to finalise everything today, it's with good reason that we have set those 3 matters aside. There's obviously a need for further discussion and further conversations so that we can confidently address the options on those and make our recommendations. But we've made significant progress over the last couple of days and certainly made some really good headway in terms of getting a final draft of the strategy put together and a finalised strategy taken to SLG on the 23rd of April for their approval. So we've got the resolutions in front of us. They've been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Is there anything else we need to do today before I adjourn? All right. So I'll now adjourn the meeting to a date and time to be determined and notified. Thank you.